Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm sorry my pad is still updating. And so Josh didn't make a difference. I start over. But anyway, uh, before we start, we thank Hashem for learning and hope this will help bring Mashiach now.
Amen.
We're also learning for Shlema, for Rabbi Smith's father, Tzvi Alevi, Ben Miriam Adel, also our colleague and friend, Naftali Ben Menucha Bela,
Amen.
for Shlema, for my son, Uriel Gabriel Ben Rechochaya,
Amen.
and my friend Doctor I spoke to recently, Abraham, I don't remember his middle name, Ben Shoshana.
Amen.
Okay, before we get started today, because I know at some point our esteemed lawyer is going to show up here and tell us that this is a family share. Now, I don't know where he gets a family share. When we used to have a very young genius child here, it was a family share. Since then, everybody's adults. But he keeps on saying it's a family share, family share. But I'm going to tell you, and I'm not sure why Josh you keep on sending me all these astrology
He mentioned
pictures.
it because people watch this year.
Yeah,
while
but
their
we don't
kids
have
are-
little kids watching this year. But anyway, I'm not going to argue, whatever. So I made euphemisms for today, all right, before we get started, all right? So you'll know what I'm talking about. This still hasn't started. Let me try this tomorrow again.
Here, get a
One second,
real,
if I don't have it.
a
Yeah,
real
welcome, Professor. We haven't started yet. Okay, welcome to notes. That's the wrong page. Go back in the Gemara. Let's see if it'll start now. Come on, baby. All right. Anyway, the euphemisms for today is we'll be discussing the word Zona a lot. So I'm going to refer to her as the dressmaker. All right, because I found out that I think in Scotland in the old days they were referred to as dressmakers. So remember when I say dressmaker, what I'm talking about. The next thing is yesterday when I was talking about Action Jackson, all right, the stuff that went on with the dressmaker, we're just going to call that doing magic tricks. All right, if you catch my drift, you understand what kind of trick it is. And we're not going to call the guy who's involved here Reuven, all right, because, why put down Reuven, Shimon, Levi? We always use the names. We're going to call him plain John, all right? The guy who's involved in
No,
this
that's
case.
not a good name.
No, John.
Joe is better.
No, John for a dressmaker is correct. Okay, also, when we discuss Esnan, which is the payment for John to doing magic tricks with the dressmaker, it's usually referring to a point of service. But we will discuss what happens when he's using a credit card or a debit card, etc. Okay, so let's get started. Here we are. We're at the bottom, I believe, the last few lines of Samach Beis. All right, 62. Elahachi kama. All right. Rather, this is what the Brisa said. Nasan la v'achakach ba'aleha. So John gave this dressmaker an animal in order to do magic tricks. All right? And afterwards, he did some magic tricks with her later on. Or oba aleha v'achakach nasan la. Or first he did some magic tricks with the dressmaker, and later on, he gave her, not at the point of service, but later on, he paid with an animal in payment.
Did you share this with your attorney?
My attorney's not here. I'm not worried by my attorney. He don't like it, he'll show up on time. It's nana mutar. Her payment, all right, the dressmaker's payment is permitted for the altar. What does that mean? That means if for some reason this dressmaker has to bring a korban, all right, to sacrifice, all right, she can use the sacrifice, the animal that she got for doing magic, and the dressmaker doing magic with Plony named John. Okay, now, so according to this, reading from English, you see that the Bryce's second clause, at least according to Rabbi Yochanan, is that a payment to a dressmaker after doing some magic isn't regarded, one second, isn't regarded, The payment made after is not regarded as being given in exchange for the magic, and accordingly is permitted for the altar. Again, esnan, which means point of service payment. No money, no honey. You pay at the time you buy it. All right. So that is what's prohibited. But if he's paying for later on, all right, okay, or way early, all right, by means of giving an animal, that animal can be used by the dressmaker to bring a korban, a sacrifice. This is kind of wild because I didn't know dressmakers bring sacrifices, but maybe she was bringing sacrifices because she was working on Shabbos. I don't know what's going on, and then she wants to add this, whatever it is. So here's a lawyer. All right, you missed all the definitions. Someone will have to fill you in or catch it as we go. It's family friendly. So to a payment for Shemitah produce, we brought this up later. When the produce is no longer existent, okay, we said before yesterday that what if they borrowed, I think this was the Rav Yanai cases, produce from the poor people from Shemitah in the 7th year, and they weren't paying them back till the 8th year. It said it's not bound by the Shemitah prohibitions, all right, because it's way off in the future, all right? So quick definitions again, so no interruptions by you. The woman of the night referred to yesterday is now called a dressmaker. All right, dressmakers. She does magic tricks. Okay, the man involved here is not called Reuven. He's just a plain John. Okay, and when it's point of service payment for all this magic tricks with the dressmaker, that is called the Esnan payment. Everything else is credit, debit cards, etc. to be discussed. Fine, done. So don't say a word. Having cited the Bryce, the Gemara examines its rulings. It focuses first on the initial ruling and questions it. What if he first gave her the animal and then later on did some magic with her? All right? The animal is permitted for the altar. All right? Why? Because it wasn't an esnon. It was payment way before. Right? There's no relation between the two. That's the first thought, right? But why should this be so? When he does end up doing magic with her, now the top of Samach Gimel 63a, why don't we say that the prohibition of the payment of the dressmaker, which again is the esnon payment, point of service payment, in this case, even though it was not paid at point of service, it should take effect on the animal retroactively. Right? He gave it to her before, so why don't we say, but he paid her, so like he had a debit card of $50. All right, for he gave it to her. Why? We know why he gave it to her, because he was planning something for the future. So the Gemara answers, Amar Rabbi Eliezer or Eliezer, whatever's correct, Shekadma Vikri Baso. The Bryce is a case where she went ahead and brought it as an offering before she cohabited, before any magic tricks went on. All right? So you can't go and say that that payment was an esnon, was a point of service payment, because she went and already used up the credits on the slot machine. She already used up the payment by taking that animal and using it as a sacrifice. Again, maybe she was Bechalo Shabbos, she did tshuva, and she had to bring a sacrifice. So it's not existent now at the time of the magic show, if that's the case, when the tricks are going on. And so how can you say that that's an esnon? Right? Since the animal was not in existence at that time, it did what?
Esnan.
Esnon is the payment to the dressmaker.
The point of sale.
Point of sale payment, right. And we're trying to draw analogies of it before in advance and say, well, maybe it's retroactive. But we're knocking about that it's not a point of sale payment. The Gemara challenges this answer. Hechi dami, what is the case? If he said to her, when he first gave it to her. This animal shall be acquired to you from now, from this point on. And she then brought it as an offering. She brought it, to make a korban as a sacrifice before there was the, any magic show. Pshita d'shari. It's obvious that the animal's permitted. All right. The Brisa doesn't have to tell us that. All right, because nothing happened yet. This is a payment she got way a long time ago. The har leise b'shas bia, because at the time that things were going on, it didn't even exist. She had already used it as a korban, as a sacrifice. Accordingly, that which is given her is nothing more than a gift. So you can't say he paid for that because it was just a gift he gave away back when in the past. It is not regarded as the dressmaker's payment, and so it's permitted to be brought as a korban. But let's say he didn't say when he gave it, acquire it for you for now. In other words, this is not yours. Then we ask the question: if it's not hers, how'd she bring it as a korban? I can't go into your parking lot in front of the house, take your Lexus, and go sell it. And you'd cause us or you or an auction. It's not mine to sell. How did she bring it? The Ish ki yakdish es bito kodesh Amar Rahman. It says in the Torah, the rest for one stated, if a man consecrates his house, es beso, not his daughter, all right, kodesh. So it's bringing a quote from Hektish. If a man makes his house Hektish, or something he owns Hektish, he makes it holy, consecrates it to the base of Mikdash, at that point it's holy. Now notice, we're bringing an answer from Hektish, from consecrating by verbal thing. We're not saying he brought his in other words, he bought his Lexus for potential sale at the auction. We're not saying he sold his Lexus. We're not saying he made a korban with the animal. All right? So there's a difference here, we'll say. If a man consecrates his house to be holy, this teaches that whatever one consecrates must be similar to his house. My beso berishiso, just like his house is something that is in his possession, he owns it. Av kol berishiso. So anything that he wishes to consecrate must also be in his possession. Since the fellow did not tell the dressmaker to acquire the animal from now, in other words, when he gave it to her way before, he didn't say, look, I'm giving you this animal, it's yours from this point. He just, we said it was just a gift, but he didn't say acquire it, all right? It could not become hers until, until there was the Vegas magic show going on, which means that she was not able to consecrate it, all right, which means she could not make it hektish and bring it as an offering before that time and bring it as a korban. Now, if you notice, the Gemara is trying to do a fast one on us because it's the case has to do with bringing a sacrifice. They bring a sentence from Hektish, consecrating something to the base of Mikdash. Apples and oranges. It's not the same thing, all right? But they're trying to give this as the answer, all right? For in that case, if he gave the animal from now, it is obvious that the animal was permitted. And if he did not give it from now, she can't bring it as a korban, all right? So we have a question, really, all right? Did she own it? Did she not own it? All right? So Gemara resolves the difficulty. How's it resolve it? Ella damala. I love the way you ask those. Yeah, how? Ella damala. I could see when you were a little baby, Professor, and your parents were reading.
For interrupting.
No, he's not interrupting. He's just so cute. And he always says, how? Like when he was a baby and he was being read a bedtime story, you say, yeah, what happens next?
Never
are we
bedtime
there yet? Okay, so rather, Ella damala. Rather, this is what the Bryce's case. This is what he said to her, to the dressmaker. Let this animal hang out by you. All right, let it just graze there in your courtyard until I end up showing up for, it says Vegas, the night of magic tricks is going to be such and such a day, to the future. The mitzvah However, if you need it before then, let it be acquired by you from now.
Wow.
So it's almost like he's giving it as a collateral.
No, a line of credit. Credit line.
Well, same thing in this case. It's really a collateral because he's saying, I'm not giving this to you. You can't have this until such and such a date. But if you really need it, you can use it now. So it's like a line of credit, but that's not what he meant. He just meant it's a collateral by you that you could use it. It's very similar to the case of Yehuda and Tamar. Not exactly, right? When Yehuda met his dressmaker in the street, all right, she was tired of, the baby boomers and just couldn't wait. So she dresses differently, all right, and she goes out, fools Yehuda, all right? And Yehuda doesn't have money for payment for his magic show with the dressmaker, and he gives him his tzitzis and his staff. Why'd he give it? He said, yeah, hold on to this and then my slave will come and bring you tomorrow a lamb. But think about it. He wasn't selling her the staff and the tzitzis. What's she going to do with a cane and hit somebody, and a pair of tzitzis,
Gold cane.
The thing was, it wasn't really exactly the same, but it kind of reminds us of that. Because he linked, now back to Gemara, because he linked the gift with the act of, magic tricks by a dressmaker, it's by no means obvious that the animal is permitted for the altar, right? Because it's not necessarily hers yet. But because he stipulated that if necessary, she may acquire it even prior to whatever's going to happen in the future, she's able to consecrate it and offer it even now. So because in that case, it was a line of credit, to use the words Hillel just used, that's the way he gave the terminology, she could use it. Now, Rav Elazar has explained in the Bryce's case, the dressmaker offered the animal as a sacrifice before any actions happened. The Gemara accordingly is going to ask this question by Rav Hoshaya. So Rav Hoshaya comes along and he asks this question. Let's say she went ahead and consecrated it to the altar before they cohabited, right? Now, it says in English, consecrated it to the altar. So does that mean she brought it as a sacrifice, or does that mean that she was just makdashit, gave it to the Beis HaMikdash? I'm not sure at the moment. But she had not yet brought it as an offering when they cohabited, when they had magic tricks, all right? What's the law? So again, let's repeat what it says. If she went ahead and she said, this is going to be hektish, right? This is going to be Beis HaMikdash, all right? Because all you need is words there, all right, to make something hektish. He says, but it's before anything happened. What's the law? Do we say that once verbal, here, Amrinu came into Mama Amiraso, Lagavoa, Kemisiraso, Lahedyet. Once verbal declaration consecrating an object to the holy is as effective as one's actual transfer of an object to a private person? Keman de akriv teidami. It's as if this dressmaker had already brought the animal as an offering on the altar, as a korban. So apparently the Gemara is using this, making hektish and bringing it as a korban for the same example. They keep on bouncing back and forth. Therefore, the consecrated animal cannot be designated as a dressmaker's wages, all right? Because we know that if this was a esnan, if this was a point of sale, all right, paid with a dog, paid with an animal at that time, that cannot be brought as a korban. That cannot be used. So this is the whole question. It's not a esnon. It's not a point of sale, cash on the table, no money, no honey kind of magic tricks going on. It's something that happened before right now. Oh, Dilmore, perhaps we say the following. Hashtamia hakai ve'ise be'ene. However, behold, the animal remains existent, hence extant. Extant, I think, means existent. Hence, it can be designated as a wage and is therefore disqualified from being brought upon the altar. Again, that's the question. All right. The Gemara questions the basis for this inquiry. Why did he ask this? All right, when we know that the point of sale, that's definitely called an esno, and that's definitely not allowed, right? Why are we saying if it's given beforehand, this and that, or it's a line of credit, all these things? Where does this whole idea come from to ask the question? The tifshit be the Rabbi Eliezer. Let it be resolved by the words of Rabbi Eliezer or Adama, Rabbi Eliezer or Rabbi Eliezer, because we're not sure what name it should be. What did he say? Shekadma b'kravto. The Bryce's case is where she went ahead and brought the animal as an offering. She went and brought it as a sacrifice before there was any magic tricks going on with John. Davka Krafto. This implies that only when she brought it as an offering does the Bryce said it's valid. In other words, only when she brought it as a korban, as a sacrifice of our hikdishatu lo. But if she merely consecrated, now it's separating those two situations. If she just went and consecrated the animal before any magic had gone on, it would not be valid for the altar. For once that act would happen, all right, when the magic act finally happened on Vegas, all right, that would render it an esnon, and that's not allowed to be used. See how confusing it is when you have to use family PG words? What?
We have a question.
Yes.
So if the magic trick consists of pulling a rabbit out of the hat, can then they use the rabbit as the sacrifice?
The peanut gallery is asking the question, if the magic trick...
Whoa.
Okay, you want me to quote you? All right. If Jeff...
Yaakov
Shmuel asks if the magic trick consists of pulling a rabbit out of the hat, can the rabbit be brought up as a korban? And the answer is no, because a rabbit cannot be used as a korban. Fine. All right. Okay. All right. That's one of the animals that are delineated specifically, that you can't use. Here. Right. On Nevet, Shafan, Gamal, and what do you call it? Chazir. If Rabbi Elazar's very statement implies they can't, you got your 10 seconds of fame, right? If Rabbi Elazar's very, you know what? If you keep that up, you will get to give the class tomorrow. I'll get even with you. If Rabbi Elazar's very statement, watch out, you're treading on very shaky ground. You can also prepare for shit. If Rabbi Elazar's very statement implies, see, that quiets him down.
Strict
Rabbi Elazar's very statement implies that consecration before magic tricks is not caused to permit the animal. So what's the basis of Rav Hoshaya's inquiry? All right, so Gemara explains, Rabbi Elazar, Kufei Kami Baile, the statement of Rav Elazar is itself the matter about which Rav Hoshaya is inquiring. As follows, what is the significance of Rav Elazar's interpreting the Brisa as discussing a case where the dressmaker actually sacrificed the animal she got earlier on before any magic was going on? Mifsha Pshita Leila Rabbi Elazar da Krifta Davka. On one hand, perhaps it was clear to Rav Elazar that only if she actually brought the animal as an offering, as a sacrifice, would it be valid. But aval hikdishato lo. But if we're talking about making something hektish, which is just a verbal statement, then it's not a valid offering to the base of mikdash. Ta'isei b'shas bia, since it's not existent at the time of the magic tricks, because wait, it's not, boy, this gets me confused, only the English part. It's not a valid offering. just I'm going to read, because it's not existent at the time of the magistrates. O Dilma, or perhaps Rev says, he crept up Shitale, because it was clear to him that if he brought it as an offering before anything happened, it's valid. Vikdisha Sapkala, but he wasn't certain whether this holds true if she merely made it hektish. So since he was in doubt, he refrained from interpreting the Bryce in this matter. According to the first possibility, where the statement reveals that if the dressmaker consecrated the animal, it's disqualified for being brought on the altar. According to the second possibility, his statement merely reveals that he himself was unsure of the animal's status. Rav Hoshea's inquiry illustrates the basis for Elazar's doubt. And what's the conclusion? Tekel. Tekel means Tishbi, Taretz, Kushis, or Bias. We're going to have to wait for Navi. He's going to answer all questions. All right, let's continue. New statement. We're going to return to Brisa. It's going to examine the second ruling. All right, what if they did the actions, the magic trick? The show must go on. It happened. All right, and then afterwards, she went, took the animal she got at the point of sale, and she went and what she wanted to do with it. All right. He did it, and then afterwards he gave her an animal. So how long afterwards? He gave 3 years afterwards, a year afterwards. So I'm sorry, this wasn't the point of sale. He gave it later on. Esnana mutar. So that esnan, that payment for the dress, all right, dressmaker's payment is permitted. Why? It is permitted because it wasn't a point of sale pay. It was he paid what?
No, he got the credit.
What do you mean he got the credit?
He didn't. He didn't. He didn't have to pay at the point of sale. Credit pays later.
Don't confuse me with my own analogies. All right. They had the Vegas show. It was a magic show. He was involved. All right. He was the person who went behind the booth. No one saw what was happening in there. All right. He comes out. And then later on, a year later, he comes back to Vegas and he says, dressmaker, here's the animal. Yeah, I never paid you for my ticket. All right. A renewal. But compare this to the following Bryces. Now we're going to bring another Bryce that's going to apparently, we're not sure what to do with this yet. You know, is that considered an esnan? Is it considered the equivalent of a point of sale payment? This we learned in another Bryce, the same situation. He came to the show, all right, and later on he paid her. Afilu mikan ad shloshim, even 3 years later, esnana asur. This esnan, this payment, is prohibited from going to the altar. So we have two Bryces. One says, ours here, that it's mutar. They can use the payment that came on later on. She could use it, the dressmaker, to bring as a sacrifice. She can bring the sheep that he gave her. The other one that's just brought now, Bryce says, nope, guess what? It cannot be used. All right? So Bryce rules to the payment given later may not be offered as sacrifice. This contradicts the ruling of the earlier Bryce. So how's the Gemara resolve this? Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Amar Rav Chisda. Well, they say, lo kasha. It's not a difficulty. Hadamar hispali li b'tolazeh. In one Bryce, it says, this one, meaning this animal, all right, he's specific here. It's like a prat, not a clayaway. This one, the Bryce that prohibits the animal from is speaking where he said, no, let's do some magic for this lamb. All right, even though he didn't give the lamb to her till later on, he's already labeled that lamb as payment. All right, no, he hasn't. Don't use the term consecrate. That's something that she's going to do. No, that's going to confuse. He just said, hey, this is the show. I'm not paying for the ticket, but I'm paying for the ticket with this lamb. You see, it's got this little clip on the ear. Yeah. All right. I'm going to bring it over to you in 3 years, or maybe show the picture of this specific lamb. but he said that's what she's being paid for, the dressmaker. In that case, no matter when he actually hands it to her, it is hers from the moment of the show. All right. Therefore, it is a dressmaker's payment and be offered on the altar.
Right.
Why? Because he gave it to her point of sale. He gave it to her no, it's not credit. He gave it to her as apothecary or apothecary, as a no, it's not even that. He actually gave it to her, but he physically didn't deliver.
Yeah.
It's like he made the sale, but the sale is to buy this item. The still has to be shipped by
Reserved
North
it.
American
He
Van Lines.
reserved it for
A specific reserve on one item. Great word. Adam, I would not use the term layaway. This is a family share. Excuse me. Adam Allah Hisbala gotcha. Hadis Gamala.
$12 for J.C. Penney's layaway.
Hadamala Hispale Betala Stum. However, this one, the brisa that permits the animal to be brought on the altar, is speaking where he said to her, let's have the magic show, all right, without specifying any particular one, all right? So he said, I own a ranch in Texas.
Right.
I've got, 1,000 cattle. I'm going to send you one of my cows. All right? So what am I going to do with a cow in the middle of Vegas? All right. All right. In that case, she does not acquire the animal until he gives it to her sometime after the magic show. Therefore, it is not regarded as having been given in exchange for the magic show, and therefore may be offered on the altar. So now we understand why the two brises, although they sound alike, are not exactly alike. One was a specific payment for the future. One was a generalized payment for the future. Okay, and you see how this can be used, this answer, for things we learned yesterday. The Gemara's answer assumes that when he identifies the animal before the magic show, the dressmaker acquired it from the moment of the magic show. The Gemara questions this assumption. And when he said to her, for this lamb, when he was specific, all right, she still can't acquire it at the time of the point of sale. All right, why? Ha-michasa meshicha, for acquisition. Oh, wait. It's a question. All right, say, and when he said to this lamb, he was specific, what of it? Now they're going to say, she still can't acquire it at the time of the magic trick. Okay, because ha-michasa meshicha, because she hasn't made an acquisition on it. Right? How do Jews acquire an animal? You grab the animal by the ropes, you pull the animal, and you show it is now yours. All right? So no Mashiach was done. All right? So the answer is, guess what? We're talking about a non-Jewish idolatrous dressmaker. And when they're not on the same obligation to do Mashiach, they can acquire something, cash. All right? You want to buy this? Just give me cash.
COD.
All right? Cash on delivery. Okay. Bizona Ovedes Kochavim. So we're dealing with the dressmaker who's an idolatress. Get it? Idolatress. All right. The low Kanya b'Mashiach, who doesn't acquire a property through Mashiach, but acquires it just by paying for it. Accordingly, it is her acquiescence in the act of the magic that brings the animal into her possession. Thus, the lamb is hers from the moment of the magic show in Vegas. Another approach, another answer we'll get. And if you prefer, let's say you didn't like that answer, Le'elam Bizona Yisraelis. We're really talking about a Jewish dressmaker, okay? Who does require Mashiach, in which case she has to do the pulling, all right, of the lamb, all right? Okay, he says, here. But the Bryce's case, he had the lamb there, wasn't back on his ranch, and he had brought it with him, and it was in her backyard.
Yeah.
All right. So if it's in her backyard, it's in her chutz, as we say. It's in the confines of her lodge. All right. What?
Domain.
Domain. Thank you. I couldn't think of the word. So the courtyard acquired it for her because there was and therefore was hers at the point of sale. All right. Even though she didn't do a meshicha. All right. Continuing. Gemara questions the second approach, the courtyard approach. He declared bechatzera, but if the lamb was standing in the courtyard at the time of the magic tricks going on with the dressmaker, how can the Brisa describe the case as they had, the magic show, and afterwards he gave it to her in payment? I mean, either he gave it to her afterwards or he gave it to her now. So he gave it to her afterwards, it says in the Brisa, but now you're telling me, but it was really in her courtyard when you're drawing the difference between Jewish dressmakers and idolatrous dressmakers. Hakanyala, when she acquired it from the moment it was placed in the courtyard, even before, the show. So how do we answer that? No. Shricha, all right. The Brice's description is applicable. For the Brice's case, the Shavei Nihole Apotike. All right, I used the term early on because he designated the lamb as an apotike for her. So this again is very. It's almost like Yudan Tama but let's say Yehuda actually gave her a lamb at this time. He said, "This will be your lamb, but I'm not giving it to you yet. Maybe you have to pay it off." Because he had just bought it somewhere, but he hadn't paid for it yet. So he knew he was going to pay for it tomorrow. Just kind of make up a story. So if he uses this in apoteke, all right, a property designated by a debtor for a payment of a debt obligation. So it's not exactly collateral. Collateral is backup just in case. This is actually a designation, all right? Da'amala, for he said to her, I meist sina lich Zuze mikan ad yam ploni mutov. All right, if I bring you money in payment from now until such and such a date, it is well. V'lo shachle v'esnach. And if not, you can take this lamb. So, in that sense, it was a little bit like a Yehuda story. All right. Because the lamb is pledged her as an apoteke from the time of the magic show and was standing in her courtyard at that time, it's forbidden as a payment for the dressmaker. Because it is not revealed to hers until sometime after the magic show, the Brisa refers to the case as one in which he did the magic with her and afterwards gave her the animal in payment. So you see how, this whole machlokes and between the different Brisas is because it kind of depends on what slant you put to the actions that are going on. All right. The Gemara above spoke of the practice of Rabbi Yannai's household. We learned this the other day. Remember Rabbi Yannai's household? We learned yesterday. I'm going to remind you. They would go during Shemitah time, all right, and they would go to the poor people who were collecting Shemitah, and they said, hey, we'd like some of the vegetables and fruit you collected. All right, just give it to us. We're not buying it. You're allowed to have it, and can we borrow it? All right, it's funny. Borrow food, you eat the food, but that's what it is. And then a year later, all right, they pay them when it wasn't Shemitah produce. With that, so the question was, were they actually paying for? And he said at that time it's okay to pay a year later for the stuff you borrowed during Shemitah. In other words, it wasn't like a point of service.
I just want to add.
Thing. Yeah.
On the commentary there, it said that it was a kindness that they were doing because those vegetables were going to go bad anyways.
Okay, that's right. Hillel said in the commentary that it said this was like the last day, it's expiring Tuesday, when you get the special 2-for-1s. All right, so they were actually doing something nice to these people who were collecting. They knew they had more than they needed. It would be no good the next day. I don't know how much of a kindness, even though a commentary. Who's the commentary? Not that I'm going to disagree. It's okay. There is a commentary that says And if it's being mentioned there in the Quran, it's
No,
obviously it's
first of all, it was
okay,
yesterday.
so, all right, so he carries weight that this was a kindness to the poor person. Don't look it up now. Don't worry about it. Right. Okay. But we said that it is permitted to pay for it a year later. So Rabbi Yochanan explained that since the Shemitah produce is no longer existent at the time of repayment, all right, the replacement produce is not considered to be the exchange of the Shemitah produce and is accordingly permitted for use. And we mentioned yesterday that at what point does the Shemitah produce become no longer prohibited? No longer permitted when the animal that eats that specific type of produce stops eating it. So it can happen shorter than the 7th year, the permission to have those fruits and vegetables. The Gemara now challenges Rav Yochanan's ruling. Masiv Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes challenged it. Omer Adam LaChamarov. Oh my God, I'm not even at the second page. A man says to his donkey drivers and his workers, he says, here's a buck, go get yourself dinner. Or he says, here's some money, a dinar. All right, here's some dollars. All right, go out and drink with this dinar I'm giving it to you. And we're not concerned. Lo mishum shvius. This is in the Shemitah year. We're not worried about Shemitah. V'lo mishum Maser. Or if it's in the case of Maser, we're not worried about that. Lo mishum yayin nesach. And not on account of yayin nesach. In other words, when he gives him the money and said, here, it's lunchtime, go get yourself lunch. We're not worried that they might go and buy some, it's in the 7th year Shemitah, or go buy someone's masir. Remember, masir sheni can only be used for eating, but money's involved. Yeah, the owner originally can trade it for money to then buy stuff, but here this guy's got money and he's buying someone. He's trying to say you can't. It's different cases, and not on account of, and we're not worried about them going and buying yayin nesech even. All right, which maybe we should, all right? Why? Since he does not pay for the food or drink himself. He didn't specifically say that. He said, it's dark in here, the lights are not on, I wonder how I can offer you a drink. It was a sleight of hand, back to the magic tricks. Okay, he said, here's some money, go get yourself some to eat. But he didn't specifically say, hey, here's a dollar, you can go buy yayin nesech with it. But if he said, but what if he says, go get lunch and I'm going to pay for it? All right, then we're a little worried about it. Choshesh mishum shvius, or mishum shmita, or mishum maser, mishum yayin nesech. Then we might be worried. What if they bought one of these prohibited items and then he goes to pay for it? He's not allowed to pay for this. All right. When the first case was, he didn't know what they were going to buy. He gave them money. So they went and they bought this stuff. Hey, I don't know what you were going to do. You have bechira chapshis, all right? But you have free will. But when they did it, and then he says, I'm going to pay for it. And now he's paying for things that are prohibited. That's a problem. So in this case, he pays for the food and drink himself. He must take care that the workers do not patronize a storekeeper who sells prohibited food, all right, which would be Shemitah, the 7th year produce, Masir, all right, tithing, and the third one would be yayin nesech, wine that will be used for idolatry libations. Okay, the Baraisa rules the one who reimburses the storekeeper for his workers' food must be concerned about the sort of food the workers choose. One danger is they might choose Shemitah produce, which would mean that the dinar, the employer later pays for the produce, will be invested with Shemitah sanctity, in which case he would be forbidden to give it to the storekeeper. Now, if you've been paying attention, you might realize, this sounds a little bit similar to the magic act that happened in Vegas that he's going to be paying for later on. And initially you said if he pays later on, it's okay. And so now, but wait a minute, he's paying later on for some reason. You see where the question's trying to evolve. Ama kikar para. We see that when the employer pays for the Shemitah produce, the me'isa kapara, he's paid with prohibited money. For although the dinar is paid after the produce has been consumed, just like after the Magic Act, all right, it is considered to be exchange of the Shemitah produce. Therefore, it assumes Shemitah sanctity and may not be given to the storekeeper. Now we'll go back last week when we learned about the paperclip analogies, and the red paperclip was prohibited, and then the second paperclip that was changed was also prohibited. But then the third and the fourth changes say growing. So in this case, if he goes and he pays for forbidden food, in other words, he exchanges the forbidden Shemitah food with money, that money is prohibited also. All right? Did I just say that right? Yeah, the din is paid after the produce is consumed. It is considered to be exchange of Shemitah produce. Therefore, it's assumed Shemitah sanctity and may not be given to the storekeeper. Which, how does he's going to use money that's being used for the Shemitah payment, but that money has now become prohibited. So how does he use that money to pay? Para, when he pays for the produce in the 8th year, the Me'isura Kapara. Let's say that he's paid with prohibited money. We're asking a Shaila question on the story of Rabbi Yannai. That is to say, although the 8th year produce with Rabbi Yannai's household paid their debt was received after the Shemitah produce was consumed, it should be considered the exchange of Shemitah produce that they borrowed and should accordingly be prohibited for use. No, it makes sense. Why did Rabbi Yochanan approve the action of Rabbi Yannai's household, which we said the other day? So Gemara resolves the difficulty. Tegama Rav Chisda b'chendronei hamakifo. Rav Chisda interpreted the Braisa as dealing with its storekeeper who regularly exchanged credit to the employer. The Meshibad lay, so the property of the employer becomes encumbered by the storekeeper. As soon as the workers take the food, the keven, the orchela fuke, that is to say, since it is the storekeeper's regular practice to extend credit to employer, kane lay din agabe, the storekeeper acquires the rights to redeem the employer's property. So basically, this guy has, the owner of his business has a debit account. He's already deposited money by the storekeeper. He's put $1,000 in his safe. And every time he sends someone, says, yeah, don't worry, I have an account there, buy an account, right? Even though the storekeeper might not take the money till later on, all right, it's on the debit account, all right, it is considered in that case, is it considered at being paid at the moment? Or is it considered that he paid way before? I mean, you see the questions. I don't have all the answers right now. What?
I think since it's his normal way of practice is at the moment.
Well, it's a normal way of practice in this specific case, all right? But if that's what it is, he's not allowed to do it. Because you're not allowed to pay now. But he paid the money in advance. So he had an account. So therefore, he wasn't paying it for now. The store owner already owned his money. He owned $1,000. He was just taking out of the stash that was there.
And that's no different from today. People that work by the hour, they get paid 2 weeks after. So they always have a deposit with the employer.
This is money.
I don't know if that's the same. I don't know if it's the same. Okay, all right. Because there's a prior relationship of trust between the storekeeper and the employer, the storekeeper provides the goods in full confidence of repayment. This level of confidence creates an understanding between the two parties, I'm just reading here, whereby the storekeeper acquires an encumbrance on a dinar's worth of the employer's property. Because his rights to the property come at the moment of sale, the dinar ultimately is considered an exchange of the Shemitah produce for which it pays. In the case of Rabbi Yannai, by contrast, the one who supplied the Shemitah produce did not regularly extend Rabbi Yannai credit. because of a prior relationship was lacking, like in the store case. The supplier was not fully confident of being repaid and therefore gained the encumbrance of Rav Yanai's property. Because he received nothing at the time of sale, the repayment was not considered the exchange of the Shemitah produce and was consequently permitted. The bottom line here is, because you have to think about exactly what they said, is, again, if it's not point of sale payment, all right, the issue, the prohibition does not exist, and the acquirement by the dressmaker or the storekeeper, whoever it is, for something that really was not permitted, all right, didn't really apply. All right, we've got 3 minutes, let's just do another line to but according to Rav Chisda, what's the law in the case of a storekeeper who does not regularly extend credit? Mutar, it is permissible for the employer to reimburse him for the work of Shemitah food. If so, but instead of the Bryce in its first segment teaching the case, go and eat with this dinner, go and eat with this dinner that I'm giving you. Lifrik Nishnei Bedina. He said it should have just taught in that case, go and eat and don't worry, I'll pay it for it. All right, so it's more specific, like I'll get a cow from my ranch. All right, so it wasn't as, but Medvar Mamurim, when are these words stated? Bechenevi Hamakipo, when the respective storekeeper who regularly extends credit to employer, Mishtabidle, for in the case of the property of employee becomes encumbered by the storekeeper. But in the case where he doesn't extend to it, that's when it's mutar, it's allowed. Let's stop there. But actually always stops with a question. So up to the word va'ad, a third of the way down, 63. Just have a question. Does anyone want to learn tonight?
Of course.
Catch up? Is that a definitely?
Zara.
All right. I don't know. Nobody else is answering. I don't know who's on here.
Yeah.
Who's still on there?
We can post it on the chat.
Well, we'll post on the chat if we have a class tonight, because I'm not sure if I can make it. If so, we'll post it early enough that it'll be right after Marav, so at least we can catch up and just be a page behind. If we can go a little bit further, we'll at least catch up further, because we're going into Shabbos in another day. Okay, thank you all, whoever's listening.
3A2, A3.
Thank you.
Whoever that was.
That was Chaim Druin.
That was Chaim?